The gunshot echoed across the rugged landscape, sending a flock of startled birds into the crimson-streaked sky as Vaughn Yates clutched his bleeding leg and collapsed against the weathered boulder. He'd been tracking the notorious Wallace gang for 3 days through the unforgiving Colorado territory. And now, a mile outside of Central City, he'd finally caught a bullet for his troubles. Clara Whitfield heard the shot from where she was gathering wildflowers along the creek bed. The year was 1876, and at 23, she'd seen enough violence in the mining town to know that gunfire rarely meant anything good. Still, she hitched up her skirts and ran toward the sound, her father's medical bag bouncing against her hip. As the only daughter of Central City's doctor, she'd learned early that hesitation could cost lives. "Hello, is anyone hurt?" she called out, scanning the rocky terrain. The setting sun cast long shadows across the landscape, making it difficult to spot anything unusual. A groan answered her, barely audible over the rustling of the tall grass. Clara followed the sound until she spotted him, a man with dust-covered clothes and a cowboy hat pulled low, blood seeping through his fingers where they pressed against his thigh. "Don't move," she instructed, hurrying to his side. "I'm Clara Whitfield, the doctor's daughter." Vaughn looked up, pain etched across his sun-weathered face. His green eyes widened with surprise at the sight of a young woman approaching him so boldly. "Miss, you shouldn't be out here. Those men who shot me might still be nearby." "They're long gone," Clara said confidently, having seen riders heading west at full gallop minutes earlier. "Let me see your wound." When she reached for his leg, Vaughn's hand caught her wrist. "Don't look," he said, his voice strained but firm. "It's not proper." Despite the gravity of the situation, Clara couldn't help the small smile that touched her lips. "Mr. Yates, Vaughn Yates. Mr. Yates, I've assisted my father in amputations, childbirths, and every manner of injury imaginable since I was 16. I assure you propriety is the least of my concerns when someone's bleeding out." When he still hesitated, she added softly, "You'd do the same for me." Something in her steady gaze made him relent. Vaughn nodded once, releasing her wrist. Clara worked efficiently, cutting away the blood-soaked fabric of his pants to reveal the wound. "The bullet went clean through," she assessed. "That's fortunate. Can you stand if I help you? My father's clinic is just on the edge of town." Vaughn gritted his teeth as she helped him to his feet, bearing most of his weight as they began their slow journey. "You're stronger than you look, Miss Whitfield." "Necessity breeds capability, Mr. Yates. Are you new to Central City? I don't recall seeing you before." "Just arrived." "I'm a bounty hunter. The Wallace gang has a price on their heads that could set a man up comfortably." Clara tensed beside him. "The Wallaces, they've terrorized this region for months. Most lawmen won't even attempt to bring them in." Vaughn's laugh was short and humorless. "I'm not most lawmen. Or perhaps I'm just more desperate for the money." As they approached the outskirts of Central City, the mining town came into view, a collection of wooden structures clinging to the mountainside, some grand and others ramshackle. All evidence of the gold rush that had transformed this wilderness into a bustling settlement. Dr. Edmund Whitfield looked up from his ledger when the door to his clinic opened. His expression shifted from surprise to concern at the sight of his daughter supporting a bleeding man. "Clara. What in heaven's name?" "Gunshot wound, clean through the thigh, no major vessels hit from what I can tell," Clara reported, helping Vaughn onto an examination table. "This is Mr. Yates, a bounty hunter after the Wallace gang." Dr. Whitfield's bushy eyebrows rose as he washed his hands. "Is that so? Well, Mr. Yates, you're either very brave or very foolish. Those men have killed 2 marshals already." "I'm aware of their reputation, sir." Vaughn winced as the doctor began examining his wound. "Clara, fetch my surgical kit and some laudanum," Dr. Whitfield instructed. As his daughter moved to obey, he lowered his voice. "My daughter has a habit of involving herself in dangerous situations. I hope bringing you here hasn't put her at risk." "The men who shot me were heading west. They won't circle back," Vaughn assured him, though he couldn't be entirely certain. The Wallace gang was known for their unpredictability. Clara returned with the requested items, assisting her father as he cleaned and stitched the wound. Vaughn refused the laudanum, gripping the edges of the table instead as the needle pierced his flesh repeatedly. "You'll need to stay off this leg for at least a week," Dr. Whitfield declared when he'd finished. "The hotel in town is comfortable enough." "I appreciate your help, but I can't afford to lose time. The Wallaces will still be out there in a week," the doctor interrupted firmly. "Try to pursue them now, and you'll tear those stitches, develop an infection, and die a slow, painful death in some canyon where no one will find you." Vaughn looked like he wanted to argue, but Clara placed a hand on his arm. "We have a spare room upstairs. You could stay here and I could change your dressings daily." When her father gave her a sharp look, she added, "It would be more convenient for everyone." Dr. Whitfield sighed heavily. "Clara has always been willful, but she's right, it would be easier to monitor your recovery here." And so Vaughn Yates found himself installed in the Whitfield's spare bedroom, looking out at the bustling main street of Central City with growing frustration as each day passed. Clara brought him meals, changed his bandages, and gradually began to linger longer during her visits, sharing news of the town or asking about his travels. On the third day, as she cleaned his wound, Vaughn found himself studying her more closely, the way her brown hair escaped its pins when she concentrated, how her eyes reflected flecks of gold in the afternoon light, the gentle confidence of her hands as they worked. "How did you learn all this?" he asked. "Most doctors wouldn't train their daughters in medicine." Clara's lips curved into a sad smile. "My brother was supposed to follow in my father's footsteps, but he died of typhoid when he was 16. I was 14 then, and I started helping in the clinic. My father realized I had an aptitude for it." She secured the fresh bandage with a pin. "He still hopes I'll marry a proper gentleman and give up these unwomanly pursuits, but until then, he's grateful for the help." "And what do you hope for?" Vaughn asked, surprising himself with his interest. Clara's eyes met his, startlingly direct. "I hope to be useful, to make a difference in people's lives. Few things feel as meaningful as saving someone who might otherwise be lost." She stood, smoothing her apron. "What about you, Mr. Yates? Is bounty hunting your life's ambition?" Vaughn looked away. "It's just a means to an end. My family had a ranch in Texas, lost it in '73 during the financial panic. My father couldn't bear the shame, he took his own life. I've been working to save enough to buy back our land ever since." The room fell silent as Clara absorbed this information. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "That explains your determination to catch the Wallaces despite the danger. The bounty would be enough to recover the ranch and then some," Vaughn confirmed. "But your father's right, I won't be much use to anyone if I'm dead." A week passed, and though Dr. Whitfield declared that Vaughn could move to the hotel if he wished, the bounty hunter found reasons to delay. He began helping around the clinic, building shelves for medicines and repairing the leaky roof that had been troubling the Whitfields all spring. His leg was healing well, though it still pained him if he stood too long. One evening, as Clara and Vaughn sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, a rider tore through town, shouting news that made Vaughn's blood run cold. The Wallaces hit the stagecoach outside of Idaho Springs, 3 dead, including the driver. Vaughn started to rise, but Clara's hand on his arm stopped him. "You're not ready," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "You can barely walk without limping." "Those men killed innocent people today because I wasn't there to stop them," Vaughn argued, his jaw clenched. "And how many more will they kill if you go after them half-healed and they put a bullet in your heart?" Clara countered. "Be patient, heal completely, then you can bring them to justice." Reluctantly, Vaughn sank back into his chair. When Clara's fingers remained on his arm, neither of them acknowledged it, but neither pulled away either. As the days stretched into a second week, Vaughn found himself less focused on the Wallaces and more attentive to the way Clara hummed softly while she worked, how the townspeople respected her medical knowledge despite her sex, the quiet strength she carried without ostentation. On a clear Thursday morning, as Vaughn was splitting firewood behind the clinic against Dr. Whitfield's orders, but his leg felt strong enough, Clara approached with 2 cups of coffee. "My father would have a conniption if he saw you doing that," she remarked, handing him a steaming cup. "Which is why we won't tell him," Vaughn replied with a rare smile, setting aside the axe. They sat on a stack of logs, enjoying the mountain air and each other's company. The Founders' Day dance is this Saturday, Clara said after a comfortable silence. The whole town attends. There's music, food, dancing. Vaughn looked at her sidelong. Are you inviting me, Miss Whitfield? A blush colored her cheeks. I'm merely informing you of a local custom, Mr. Yates. Well, in that case, he replied, his eyes twinkling, I feel obligated to participate in local customs while I'm a guest in your town. Clara's smile could have outshone the sun. Saturday evening found the town square transformed, with lanterns strung between buildings, tables laden with food, and a small band playing lively tunes. Vaughn felt self-conscious in his best shirt, the only one not stained with blood or dirt, but when Clara appeared in a simple blue dress that matched her eyes, his discomfort faded. You look beautiful, he said honestly, offering his arm, Doctor. Whitfield watched them from across the square, his expression a mixture of concern and resignation. Several young ladies whispered behind their fans as Clara and Vaughn danced, his slight limp hardly noticeable as they moved together. People are staring, Clara murmured, though she didn't seem troubled by it. Let them, Vaughn replied. I'm dancing with the prettiest girl in Colorado territory. As the night deepened and the music slowed, Clara rested her head against Vaughn's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. For the first time since losing his family's ranch, Vaughn felt the stirrings of hope for something beyond revenge and restitution. Their peaceful interlude was shattered the next morning when Marshal Peterson burst into the Whitfield home during breakfast. Yates, there you are. Got word the Wallace gang is holed up in an abandoned mine 10 miles north of here. I'm gathering a posse. Clara's fork clattered against her plate as Vaughn stood. I'll get my gear. Vaughn, no, Clara protested, following him to his room. Your leg is healed enough, he insisted, strapping on his gun belt. This might be our only chance to catch them all together. Then I'm coming too, she declared. Reaching for her father's medical bag, Vaughn turned to her, his expression incredulous. Absolutely not. These men are killers, Clara, and there will be wounded who need attention, she countered. I won't get in the way of the fighting, but I won't sit here wondering if you're bleeding out in some mine shaft either. They glared at each other, locked in a battle of wills until Dr. Whitfield appeared in the doorway. Clara's right, he said heavily. If there's shooting, there will be injuries. The nearest doctor besides me is in Denver. He fixed Vaughn with a stern look. You make sure she stays well back until the shooting's done, you hear. Against his better judgment, Vaughn found himself riding out with a posse of 8 men and Clara Whitfield, her medical bag secure on her saddle and determination etched in every line of her face. The abandoned mine was nestled in a narrow gulch, the entrance partially collapsed but still accessible. From their vantage point on the ridge above, they could see 5 horses tethered outside. That's them all right, Marshal Peterson muttered. Wallace and his 4 brothers. He turned to Clara. Miss Whitfield, you stay here with Thompson. The rest of us will approach from different angles to cut off any escape. Clara nodded, though her eyes were fixed on Vaughn as he checked his revolver. Be careful, she whispered as he prepared to descend with the others. Vaughn touched her cheek briefly. Always am. The plan was simple: surround the mine entrance and call for surrender. If the Wallaces refused, they'd have no choice but to fight their way out against overwhelming odds. But as was often the case with simple plans, things went awry almost immediately. One of the posse members dislodged a stone while positioning himself, alerting the outlaws. Gunfire erupted from the mine entrance, sending the lawmen diving for cover. Vaughn found himself pinned down behind a boulder, exchanging shots with a shadowy figure inside the mine. From her position on the ridge, Clara watched in horror as the peaceful mountain morning dissolved into chaos and gunsmoke. She counted the men, making sure Vaughn was still moving, still fighting. Thompson, a young deputy tasked with protecting her, gripped his rifle with white knuckles, clearly itching to join the fray. The firefight lasted nearly 20 minutes before one of the Wallace brothers made a break for the horses. Marshal Peterson dropped him with a shot to the shoulder. Another tried to flee up the opposite ridge but was wounded by one of the posse. The remaining 3 brothers retreated deeper into the mine. They're cornered now, Peterson shouted. "Wallace, throw out your weapons and come out with your hands up." The only response was another gunshot that sent dirt spraying near the marshal's head. "We need to flush them out," Vaughn called to Peterson. "They could hold out in there for days otherwise." The marshal nodded grimly. "Smoke them out. I've got a better idea," Vaughn replied, eyeing the partially collapsed entrance. "If we could cause another cave-in, not completely blocking it but making it clear they're in danger of being buried alive." The plan was quickly organized. Several men positioned themselves to fire at strategic points of the mine's support structure, while others kept their guns trained on the entrance. Vaughn, moving with only a slight hitch in his step, coordinated their efforts. At Peterson's signal, they fired simultaneously at the wooden supports. With a groan and a cloud of dust, part of the entrance collapsed, sending a rumble deep into the mine. "Wallace," Peterson bellowed through the settling dust. "Next one brings the whole mountain down on your heads. Come out now." For several tense moments, there was silence. Then a voice called from within, "Don't shoot. We're coming out." One by one, the remaining Wallace brothers emerged, squinting in the sunlight, their weapons left behind in the mine. As they were being secured with handcuffs, Clara hurried down from her position to tend to the wounded outlaws. "The famous Wallace gang," Vaughn remarked, standing over the brothers. "Not so fearsome now." Enoch Wallace, the eldest, spat at Vaughn's feet. "You won't live to spend that bounty, mister." "Bold words for a man in chains," Vaughn replied evenly. As Clara moved among the wounded, treating both outlaws and posse members with equal care, the youngest Wallace brother writhed in pain from a bullet in his gut. "I don't want to die," he whimpered as she examined him. "You should have thought of that before you started robbing and killing," Thompson said coldly from nearby. Clara shot him a reproachful look. "He's barely 18. Get me fresh water from the stream, please." Thompson hesitated, then complied, leaving Clara alone with the injured outlaw. None of them noticed Enoch Wallace working his hands free of his poorly secured restraints until it was too late. With a roar, Wallace broke free, grabbing a hidden derringer from his boot. Before anyone could react, he seized Clara, pressing the small gun to her temple. "Nobody move," he shouted, backing toward the horses. "I'm taking the lady, and if anyone follows, I'll put a bullet in her pretty head." Vaughn froze, his hand hovering near his holster. Clara's eyes met his, wide with fear but remarkably steady. "Let her go, Wallace," Vaughn said, his voice dangerously calm. "She's not part of this. She's my ticket out of here," Wallace snarled, dragging Clara backward. "Once I'm clear, I'll let her go. Maybe—" Clara's medical training had taught her about pressure points and vulnerable areas of the human body. As Wallace continued backing away, she calculated her chances. Meeting Vaughn's gaze one more time, she gave an almost imperceptible nod. In one fluid motion, Clara jabbed her elbow hard into Wallace's solar plexus while simultaneously twisting away from the gun. The outlaw gasped, his grip loosening just enough for her to break free and dive to the ground. Vaughn's revolver barked once, and Wallace crumpled, the derringer falling harmlessly from his hand. A neat hole showed where the bullet had entered his forehead. Clara. Vaughn was at her side instantly, helping her to her feet, his hands frantically checking her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "I'm all right," she assured him, though she was trembling. "I knew you'd have a clear shot if I could just get out of the way." The marshal and the rest of the posse secured the remaining outlaws while Vaughn kept Clara close, unwilling to let her go even after the danger had passed. The journey back to Central City was subdued. The wounded Wallace brothers were placed in a borrowed wagon, the dead one draped over his horse. Clara rode beside Vaughn, occasionally reaching over to touch his arm as if reassuring herself he was really there. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," Vaughn told her quietly as they neared town. "And the most foolish." "I could say the same about you pursuing bounties with a barely healed leg," she replied, but there was no admonishment in her tone, only relief that they had both survived. Word of the Wallace gang's capture spread through Central City before the posse even reached the main street. People poured out of shops and saloons to witness the procession. Dr. Whitfield pushed through the crowd, his face ashen until he spotted his daughter riding tall and unharmed. The next few days passed in a flurry of activity. The surviving Wallace brothers were held in the town jail awaiting transport to Denver for trial. Marshal Peterson made sure everyone knew it was Vaughn Yates who'd tracked the notorious gang and played a crucial role in their capture. The substantial bounty was paid in full, and Vaughn found himself with more money than he'd held at one time in his entire life, enough to buy back his family's ranch, and then some. With his goal accomplished, there was no reason for him to remain in Central City. Yet as the day of his planned departure approached, Vaughn found himself inventing reasons to delay one last check of his wound by Dr. Whitfield, helping repair the church roof damaged in a recent storm, teaching Clara to improve her shooting for protection. On the night before he was set to leave, Vaughn and Clara walked along the creek where she had first heard the gunshot that brought them together. "So, Texas tomorrow," Clara said, trying to keep her voice light. "You must be eager to see your family's ranch again." Vaughn stopped walking, turning to face her. "Clara, I've been thinking," she looked up at him, moonlight silvering her features. Texas is a long way from here. The ranch needs a lot of work. It'll be lonely." He took her hands in his. "Unless I had someone with me. Someone who's not afraid of hard work or danger. Someone who sees the good in people, even foolish bounty hunters who don't know when to stay down." Clara's breath caught. "Vaughn Yates, are you asking me to go to Texas with you?" "I'm asking for more than that." He knelt carefully, his healed legs still a bit stiff. "I'm asking if you would consider being my wife. I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never met anyone like you." "Yes," she interrupted, pulling him to his feet and into her arms. "Yes, I'll marry you." Their kiss was sweet and promising, full of the future they would build together. Dr. Whitfield took the news better than either expected. "I always knew you'd leave someday," he told Clara wistfully. "Your spirit is too big for this small town, but Texas." He shook his head before turning to Vaughn. "You'd better take good care of my daughter, young man." "I will, sir," Vaughn promised. "And we won't leave until we've found a replacement for Clara at the clinic." Their wedding was a simple affair in the Central City church 2 weeks later. Clara wore her mother's lace-trimmed dress, and Vaughn stood tall and straight, no trace of a limp as he spoke his vows. Marshal Peterson served as best man, joking that he was losing his best deputy before Vaughn had even been sworn in. As they prepared to depart for Texas, the entire town gathered to bid them farewell. Dr. Whitfield presented them with a fully stocked medical bag for emergencies, since the nearest doctor might be miles away. "We'll visit," Clara promised her father as they embraced one last time. "And perhaps one day, when you're ready to retire, you'll come join us." The journey to Texas was long but full of shared dreams and plans. When they finally arrived at the Yates Ranch, it was in worse condition than Vaughn had feared. The house, weather beaten and sagging, fields overgrown, fences broken. Clara surveyed it all with practical eyes. "It's nothing we can't fix together," and fix it they did. Over the next year, they rebuilt the ranch house room by room, repaired fences, and cleared fields. Clara became known in the nearby town as a skilled healer, often treating neighbors' injuries and illnesses when the local doctor was unavailable. Vaughn occasionally assisted the local sheriff when dangerous work arose, but his bounty hunting days were behind him. On their first anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their restored home watching the Texas sunset, Clara placed Vaughn's hand on her slightly rounded belly. "I hope he has your eyes," she said softly. Vaughn's expression of surprise gave way to pure joy. You're certain it's a boy?" "Just a feeling," Clara replied with a smile, "though I'd be equally happy with a daughter." 7 months later, their son Victor was born in the same bedroom where Vaughn had entered the world 28 years earlier. Dr. Whitfield, who had arrived a month before the birth to help with the transition, pronounced his grandson perfectly healthy and his daughter the most capable midwife he'd ever assisted. As Vaughn held his son for the first time, Clara watching them with tired eyes and a radiant smile, he reflected on how a single gunshot had altered the course of his life. Had he not been wounded outside Central City, had Clara not heard and come running, had she not insisted, "You do the same for me," when he tried to preserve his dignity, none of this happiness would exist. "What are you thinking about?" Clara asked, reaching for his hand. About how lucky that bullet was, he answered honestly. It gave me you. Clara's laughter filled the room. Only you would consider getting shot lucky, Vaughn Yates. It was the luckiest day of my life, he insisted, leaning down to kiss her. Well, until today. As the years passed, the Yates ranch prospered. They added a daughter, Catherine, to their family 3 years after Victor. Dr. Whitfield eventually retired to a small house on their property, where he enjoyed his grandchildren and occasionally assisted Clara when medical emergencies arose in the area. Vaughn never regretted exchanging his life as a bounty hunter for that of a rancher and family man. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, he would rub the scar on his thigh and remember the fierce young woman who had found him bleeding against a boulder and changed his life forever. And Clara, watching him from across their home, would smile knowingly. She had saved him that day, yes, but he had saved her too, from a life constrained by others' expectations, and given her wings to become everything she was meant to be. Together, they had built something neither could have achieved alone: a home, a family, a legacy of love that had begun with a wounded leg, and the simple truth that compassion given freely would always find its way back to the giver.